Hello everyone, welcome back. I think I have something pretty interesting to show you today. I think I've found another global hallmark of the ancient megalithic builders. Now, I think if you guys have watched my channel, you know me lately for my nub research and the nub research that my team does on Twitter. And you guys know, hopefully by now, the significance of those nubs and all the places around the world that have them. Well, I think I found another perhaps related hallmark to the nubs. It might even explain how the nubs are formed. It might explain how some of the other megaliths and bedrock is shaped and sculpted. I think it's really significant. I don't think anyone has ever talked about it or classified these. So I'm going to try to do that today. This is very ongoing research. I just found one today, as a matter of fact, and one yesterday, two completely different regions. So I think I have enough now, though, to propose this hypothesis to you. I'm just going to show you the evidence. I'm first going to show you the mainstream explanation because there is a slight possibility that some of these configurations we're going to look at today could be explained by some of the mainstream explanations of ancient lifting. But I think by the end of the video, you're going to see so many of these weird examples. You're not going to believe these little diagrams of these ancient methods that I'm going to show you. Before we begin, I'd like to give a shout out to a fellow YouTuber and researcher on Twitter, Thomas Fessler. Really nice guy. He talks about UAPs, UFOs, ancient aliens, some more out there stuff. I've had a few conversations with him on Twitter and one conversation on his channel. One of my fellow researchers, Rob, has had several conversations with Thomas and really interesting conversations. These guys know their stuff. Rob especially knows the ancient stuff like I do. So it's really cool to see them try to plug in and apply some of these physical evidence and ancient site hallmarks that we see into some of this other out there discussion. So if you like that kind of stuff, if you don't think I go far enough in what I talk about, please check out Thomas. Okay, so what are we talking about today? Today we are talking about pinch holes, and that is my own term. We were going to call these anchor holes, but I don't think that's quite the right term. Maybe it would fit the mainstream term a little bit better, but you kind of get misconstrued. You could call, a hole in an anchor stone for a boat an anchor hole. So, is that what these are? No, I don't think so. Maybe a couple examples, but vast majority here are in bedrock and megalithic blocks. Some of these sites are going to be very familiar to you, and you're probably going to wonder why you've never seen these before. But by the end of this video, guys, I think I'm going to give you a new perspective on these ancient sites that you're not going to be able to look at these ancient sites the same way ever again. I know I can't. So just like with the nubs, okay? The nubs, at first you don't notice them. You just look at pictures of ancient sites, and yes, they're very pretty. And then maybe you get a high resolution version. And, oh, wow, it's very precise and very megalithic and impressive. And then you get that certain angle and the certain lighting of that high resolution photo. And whoa, this thing has nubs on it. What are those about? These pinch holes are kind of like that. You first don't notice them in the photos, but it takes 10, 20 times looking at these photos. And then all of a sudden you start, wait a minute, that kind of looks like that. And then off to the races and down the rabbit hole. So let's start with the mainstream explanation for the things I'm going to show you today, which I have dubbed the pinch holes. So first, there are some basics here. What they are proposing for the nubs, for example, is that they were meant to be lifted by with rope and tackle wrapped around them. Perfect explanation if that's the configuration, right? But often, like we show in many videos now, the configurations of these nubs are not conducive to lifting 99% of the time. This example that you see here on the left is a fantasized, assumed example, and it's not conducive to reality. If you look at the ancient sites, they don't always look like that, and there's a presumption there that there's a nub on the opposite side. A lot of times there isn't. Sometimes these walls fall apart. We see there isn't nubs on the other side. Some of the other sides aren't even worked to any kind of precision. So I just don't think that that is necessarily the answer for the nubs all the time, probably hardly any of the time. Some of these other explanations, like in the middle and on the right, I'm okay with these. You know, Roman style stuff here, I could see them having the technology and the know-how to create these pincers and these other like Lewis holes, which are basically internal clamps that spread out, and as you lift, they spread. So you use that against gravity and it locks it in, just like with the pincers. But these are kind of assumed examples, and not all of the situations we're going to look at look like this. Another nice diagram, but again, this is like an ideal configuration for everything, and we don't see this hardly ever. The columns with these nubs, I don't think we hardly ever see that many nubs on a column. Maybe one on one side or one on opposite sides, but never that many. Maybe at the Athens Acropolis with the ones that are recycled into the retaining wall, but they're partially buried. We only see partial sides. I can't say for sure that that was the original configuration. Same with that little section of wall on the right. I'm not sure if that's really reality. You will see the Lewis clamp on the bottom there. That's the little clamp that spreads out as you lift. It's a clever little, ingenious design. I could see that working and explaining a lot of the rectangular holes in some of the blocks we see. That could probably support the lifting of different elements of substantial weight. Same with this other example on the bottom left. And then on the top left, you'll see pairs of holes with ropes lashed through. And what's going on is there is a channel, like you see top middle on that lintel, but inside, not on the edge, inside, you have a loop hole so you can lash, tackle, and different kinds of pulleys and move these things around. I could see that working. Now, it's kind of a fragile, risky way to do it, I would say. I wouldn't do this in every situation, but maybe for some of those column capitals where it's not too heavy and you need a precise fit and no one's going to see that anyway, I could see some of this working. But we're going to keep looking here and see if this is really reality. Okay, last diagram, then we'll show the real stuff. Now, this is probably the best diagram, and some pretty interesting things going on in here, and at least trying to be explained here. Now, the bottom right, the way this column is being lifted, unless there's more beams opposite that aren't being showed, like a whole TP frame, that's comical. That system's not going to support any kind of heavy weight. Those elements, those column drum elements, are interesting because the only place I've ever seen them partially fluted like that is the recycled ones in the Athens Acropolis. So I really wonder where this illustrator got his inspiration for this diagram. And then you'll look about in the middle, top middle, you'll see where it says loops. I'll zoom in for you guys. It might get a little blurry. Loops. This is what we're talking about today, a U-shaped channel that goes through the block. Not on the edge, but through it, and sometimes in the bedrock as well. It's also interesting, you can see they've shown some clamps. They call them cramps. Different shapes. The I-beam shape, the hourglass shape, an S shape. That's interesting. Some of these configurations are true to what we see. The top right, you'll notice the pitted middles of the blocks. Now, you've probably heard me and Phil talk about the pitted surfaces and pitted middles of blocks with the precision edges. Now, that was supposedly to facilitate mating the blocks against each other. You can carve away the interiors and just focus on the edges and get those flush, and it's an easier way to mate them together than the entire block. That's practical and makes sense, but that doesn't always explain some of the configurations. Like at Bellevue Mausoleum, that pitted surface is on the surface to be seen. That's implying that those surfaces aren't going to be seen, and it was kind of a shortcut. But if we see that on the surface that was meant to be seen, then it's not, that's not pretty, or at least that's not the explanation that I think we're trying to find. So that's it for the diagram, and you guys can take what you will of them. I think some of it's practical and makes sense. Some of this stuff I don't think it will make sense. Maybe this in principle is correct, but the actual forces doing this work is not correct. So I'll let you guys, think about it for yourselves and come up with your own conclusions, and just keep an open mind with what we're looking at. I think we're gonna go pretty out there today. Okay, so before we start, let me give you some comments that I'm probably going to hear, some explanations you're probably going to have, or ideas you're going to have at least, some ideas we've talked about and thrown around. You're going to probably think, okay, maybe they were tying up animals, or they were tying up something. They were for ropes, but not for lifting, but for other things like hanging things, tapestries, curtains, awnings, things like that. I'm okay with all those explanations, and some of those might be correct, and in other situations that might not be correct, and it might be none of those. I really don't know, but I want to come forward here and say at the outset that I think this is advanced evidence, high-tech evidence. I think the nubs are high-tech advanced evidence. I think the pinch holes are also high-tech advanced ancient evidence. I think that whatever's going on here, this is a byproduct of their tech, and it's how they're manipulating the stone. But to a certain extent, they can control this byproduct. And I've made the analogy a lot of welding. Welding is a procedure that you arc electricity and bond metals together. It's very sophisticated. But you can also take a welding gun and spell your name out with it and draw pictures with it. So it's multi-purpose. It's an advanced tool that can be used for simpler, utilizations. Maybe that's what's going on here. Maybe this is an advanced technology trace, but like a Swiss Army knife, but they can use the nubs and they can use these pinch holes for multiple purposes. We'll investigate that, and you guys are welcome to give me your ideas, because I'm open to everything right now. These are just interesting. The places I'm finding them are amazing. Let's keep going. So here's a nice example that would fit the mainstream definition of lifting by pinch holes. Okay, so on the left, you can see they've what looks like crudely chiseled out a channel, a notch, for maybe something to go through to lift the block. And then you also have a little divot or a little hole underneath it. Maybe that's for one of those Lewis holes, right? On the right, you have the same situation. Maybe this is a column drum segment or something, capital maybe, but it's got the same scenario, but this one's a little bit more refined, squared off, maybe a softer sewn. Same kind of thing going on in both pictures. In the picture on the left, you might already be thinking, well, wait a minute. Both of those configurations there, the hole in the somewhat middle and then the pinch hole, they're off center. If you're going to lower this block by either one of those, or even both of those together, it's not going to be centered, and that block isn't going to balance. So if you're going to take the time to dig those little bits out of your stone to lift by, wouldn't you want to center them? You've already gone to the trouble to make all the other surfaces nice. At least you could take a little more care in that step. That should be your first question, and it will get more mysterious from here. So first we'll start with a pretty famous site, one that everybody should be familiar with, Baalbek, Lebanon. You know about the massive monolith, the stone of the pregnant woman in the quarry. You know all the other aspects of the temple, the trilithon, and these other precision blocks and the bevel blocks that I've talked about. We've gone over this site many times, especially in our research group. We always come back to this site and look for more photos of it, have new aspects of it to talk about. Well, about a year ago, buddy Ziggy Dan, fellow researcher, we were talking, and one of these angles came up here. And we'll look at this first one. And what is going on here? We look on that wall. They are those pinch holes. But they're on the finished exterior. And you can say, well, maybe this was recycled and reconfigured, but well, that's the lower portion. Those are, I don't know. That looks pretty good. That looks pretty original to me, except for maybe this area up here. This could be, something else happened there, broke off, something else inserted later on. But these blocks down here all look pristine and in their original configuration now. So why do we have pinch holes on the side of the building? Now, first explanation, you're probably thinking, okay, they're tying something, right? They're putting rope through for another reason. They're going to lash up, curtains, banners, tapestries, sacrificial animals, maybe even. I'm sure a lot of people are thinking of that, that scenario here, because these are, temples for different religious purposes, and that's one of them we have to consider. I don't know. I'm open to it, but I don't know. You'll notice that, we'll zoom in a little bit. This one's a pretty good one. Some of these pinch holes now, they go across the joinery. What is that about now? Okay, so did they do this after all these blocks were set? I think in this case, yeah, you have to set these blocks before you are able to make something so nice and, delicate like that. These are pretty delicate, by the way. Let's think about it. Thin little pieces of rock like this, they could support, substantial weight in certain scenarios, but other cases, these are pretty delicate, and I'll show some broken examples in some upcoming photos, but just what are they doing here? They're not even. They undulate, different sizes. There's even one way up here. Not sure. But they are very curious, and this is like our first instance of them about a year ago, and we put them in the back catalog of all the other Hallmark evidence and things we're looking at and talking about, and it just never came up. But then I think we found some more photos recently, different angles, that made it even more interesting. Okay, here I think Ziggy found us a Google Street View, maybe he did a screenshot, and look at this now. This is more of that wall. We were just looking at the left-hand portion. You can see this is the same pattern, the same broken arch elements, whatever you want to call these. But look at these now. There are square ones, and then there are rounded ones. And they're peppered throughout this wall. They're, up to a certain point, there are none, and then there's clusters. I guess you want to call this a cluster. Rows, maybe another row up here above of smaller ones. They go across the lintel even, and keep going. So what is this about? Okay, maybe for what we're thinking, the simplistic answers for hanging tapestries, banners, and stuff, but it goes across the lintel, and just, these are kind of haphazard. I mean, yes, they're all oriented the same way. That's something we want to talk about too, is the way they're pinched now. The way they're pinched makes a vertical little bar of material there in most of the cases. Some of them you'll see that they're crooked, a little bit angled. We'll focus on that more going forward. And then here's another angle, pretty good photo. I'll zoom it in a little bit here. Now, look at this. They have like a hemispherical shape to them, like a half hemisphere, almost kind of like a capital D shape, like the nubs sometimes, I guess. Other times square, like the nubs sometimes. And they seem to, have a nice radius to them in some cases, like they're fashioned or carved out pretty well, to a pretty decent degree of finish. Aha, look down below, you'll see other little interesting elements. That's another clamp trace. I don't know what kind or configuration. I'm sure that's some kind of metal clamping of some kind going on there. I don't know if that's what's going on up here, though. I don't know if there's any metal involved here. Maybe there was, but I'd like to hear your guys' opinions in the comments on these. These are just really out there. It's going to get even more crazy now. Okay, now let's jump over to Egypt, because there's a lot of examples in Egypt and some really weird configurations. It starts to get weird in Egypt. I think this is the next site and next area that we focused on and started noticing these at. So let's look through some of these examples. Now, this first one, we'll say this one is pretty close to the Baalbek example, because they're the same kind of configuration. They go across the joinery again. You can see this one is broken. The middle is broken. I know these photos are going to be kind of hit and miss, because the The pinch holes are not something that people focus on when they go to these sites. You're not going to see just nice, clean, high resolution photos of these in most of the scenarios. I have a couple really good ones we're going to look at. One from Malta that's just, up close and personal. But a lot of these are going to be kind of blurry, so I have to apologize, but we're doing the best with what we have here. So, interesting configuration again. In a row, maybe there's more behind the column. Maybe there was more and the walls broke, right? But what are they doing here in Egypt in the exact same configuration as Baalbek, first of all? So that should be your second question is, how are they the exact same in the places that they are? Here's a pretty cool one. Now, they're up here. Why are they this high on the columns of the temple, on the inside? Okay, animals, what are we thinking here? Camels, elephants, these pretty delicate artifacts here, objects. I don't think they're going to support or restrain any kind of big animal like that. And then why would they have these animals inside their holy sanctums and things? That's another thing to think about. Are they going to sacrifice them? Would they allow these big, would you put the bull in the china shop, so to say? I don't know. But they're on multiple columns. Bad quality photo, I know. They go into other columns as well. But then we found them on statuary. Okay, what's going on here? See them? On the hip, on the shoulder, and this one down here, I believe it's on the chest. Why have them on the statuary? And why put them where they are? Would these be for hanging amulets and trinkets and votive objects, banners, tapestries, things like that? That's kind of what I'm thinking in this scenario. I'm not really thinking animal sacrifice and all these, or hooking your animals up to so you can go in the temple. I think this is, at least in some cases, they are attachment points, but I'm not sure what would be attached in some of these scenarios. But it gives me the idea of ropes and banners and tapestries and things like that. Perhaps. Another good angle here with a little bit different filter on it. Now, you can see it's kind of blurry. I know, I apologize. You can see it's kind of corroded or cavitated. It's a rough channeling of the stone. This other one here is more of that butterfly shape again. That's interesting. It's kind of bigger at the top than the bottom. And it looks more like a pinch. Some of these, they really do look like a pinch, and that's why I'm calling them the pinch holes, because it seems like something pinched it. However we're talking about this stuff, high tech, electrical arcing maybe, but it feels like there's a pinch going on here. And here's one that's come up in conversation a lot amongst the team. We really are puzzled by this one because look at it. It's destroying the art motif. It looks like it's been done over top of the art motif. Why would you do that? It's kind of a rough cavitation again. You'll see the left and right profiles are a little different. The one on the left it's got, rounded chisel marks, maybe, if you want to call them chisel marks. And then on the right, they look like straight chisel marks. Interesting profiles. And I think this isn't just a one-off. I think a lot of these other ones have this same varied profile, almost like an in and an out. I'll leave that up to you guys to speculate on further. I love this one because I just have no idea what the context of this is, what they're talking about. But this guy has obviously noticed one. It's inside this temple in Egypt. And yeah, look at that. He's pointing right to it. I wonder what he's explaining it to them as, or what his ideas are. But that's very interesting that we have one inside the temple, up high. I don't know if animals are in here, sacrificial maybe, but then again, banners, tapestries, that's kind of more what I'm thinking. Maybe something more out there, though. Maybe something like hanging electrical cords. I'm sure some people are thinking that too. Here's kind of a rough, choppy photo, but it's a close-up of another one of those columns. And I think the staining we're going to attribute to birds, droppings, doing that over time, living in the niches and stuff. Bats maybe. That makes sense to me. But the profiles again, right? We have the pairs of holes, and sometimes one's bigger than the other. It looks like an in and an out maybe. Very curious. Okay, so let's look at some other areas. Now that was inside of a temple. How about the quarry? Now this is Jebel El Silsila, and there's some pretty interesting quarry marks in this area that we probably need to talk about in another episode. But look here on the corner, aha. It looks like that same profile again. The smaller side and then the bigger side, almost like an in and an out. Curious, what is it doing here all by itself? I looked all over. I didn't see any others. Interesting mark. Hanging a lantern? Hanging a water jug? I don't know. What do you guys think? Here's what appears to be one in a small polygonal section of wall or foundation. One bigger than the other again. Interesting. Sorry for the poor quality again. I believe this is all Karnak here. Here's one from Jimmy at Bright Insight, and sorry for the orientation. I had to do a screenshot from Jimmy's video and turn it a little bit because what we're looking at is these are some people's shoes. This is inside the bent pyramid, and we have a pinch hole on what appears to be the top step. Now this is all wood now, of course. I don't know if this is the original way to get up here and all this and that, but here on this surface, the top surface and then the vertical surface, we have a pinch hole at the corner. And this might be something to delineate against the flat expressions. We have some that are on the corners and other ones that are in flat surfaces. So maybe different purposes in this configuration, but perhaps all done by this same method tech. Another one, kind of like the bent pyramid example, this one was taken, the photo was taken by the LAH Russian researchers. You guys know we talk about those guys, frequently, and they upload some amazing footage. I can't say enough about those guys. You need to go subscribe to them. I know that their videos don't have subtitles and they don't do any English videos. There's a playlist of some English videos there. Please check those out. And for the Russian videos, just put up with it, guys. Just watch what they're showing you, and that's all you really need to know. Like this example, they knew what to look at. So here we have someone focusing on one of these corner pinch holes, and what they're talking about in this case is that there's rope still attached. Now, is this original rope for these holes? Are we looking at how it originally was? And if so, this kind of rope, is this banners or other kind of hanging things? Because it's not like a big cordage. It's not for, and of course, after you put this thing in place, you're going to take the rope out if you're lowering it with the rope. So this tiny little rope looks like hanging something like a banner, tapestry, amulets, objects. I don't know, but this is the Khenkawe's mastaba inside. You don't get many photos inside of there. But that's the Giza Plateau now. And then speaking of the Giza Plateau, let's look at the Khafre Pyramid enclosure now. What do you guys see on the right? I've looked at this several times from different angles, and I always thought, oh, that's just wind erosion, right? Just wind erosion on the surface over millions of years, thousands of years, however old you think the pyramids are. But is it really that? I don't know. I think that looks more like the pinch holes we've seen in the other photos. You start to notice a lot of the erosion and damage to the ancient sites. You passed over all these holes as maybe projectiles from wars and gunfire and all that, sieges, things like that. But have you ever just stopped and looked at these holes and looked for pairs? I think you guys will be really surprised. I'm still being very surprised by all the places that have paired configurations of holes like this that seem to pinch, that loop around. Okay, so let's just start jumping around now because, you've seen a couple famous areas, and let's just show some really cool examples from places all over the world. First, I want to show China because this is one I saw just yesterday, and there's not many photos of it. So it's called the Xi'an, Xian, Steely Forest. And what I'm imagining here is that these are older elements, and the temple was maybe built around these, or the temple was built just for these in some way. So there's a few of them. They are very ornate, and they look kind of almost Indian in some of the way the facets are on the pillar part, and then different mythological animals on top and foo dogs and other things. But you look close on these. What's down there on the bottom right? That's a pinch hole on the corner, guaranteed. And I've looked at all the other photos, and there's only 4 photos that show it. It's only one in this whole Steely Forest that I can find. There might be, one that's just been hiding and no one's taken a photo of it, but for some reason, this guy, whoever he is, has a pinch hole at his base. Why is that? It's the exact same expression, that kind of half-round capital D through the corner in this scenario. Interesting animals and all kinds of things going on otherwise, other square indentions and other things, but that's really the only one, I'll prove it to you guys, the only one that has this pinch hole. Curious. And stumbled upon it talking to Dr. Charles Koss about just other cross-cultural connections and other things, and just happened to find it. We were also talking about some of the bedrock stuff in China. They have some caves, and I'm looking at this stuff in pairs, and it looks a lot like these pinch holes again. And we're going to see it a lot more in bedrock in some more famous places. Now let's jump over to Cappadocia, Turkey, because here is got some really crazy stuff going on, guys. I found one of these photos a few months ago and blew the whole thing wide open, and I've been fascinated ever since. Now let's look at the original photo first here. There's a certain door, Cappadocia. It's not like the others. You can see why. What is going on here? We have the pinch holes. We have them in the orientations we've seen before, vertically, in the corners. This one damages the motif, the arch. That's weird. Maybe these are pinch holes here. But more importantly, what are these up here? This one's diagonal. This one has a channel going down. This one over here also has a channel. And then it goes down into a horizontal. Like this one's horizontal. So they don't all show up as vertical. They can turn like we see here. And what is this configuration about? Maybe you're thinking a door, hinges, lashing for a tapestry or something to go over it to conceal it. I'm open to all those possibilities. Hanging lanterns. I really don't know here. And then if we move a little bit to the right of where we were, it's the same wall, we see more. We see a broken one. One on the corner here. One on the corner here. Another broken one and a dark patch. Interesting. Maybe some nubs. I'm not sure what to classify these are, but there's a few little bumps. I'm not sure about that. Maybe another pinch over here. I'm looking at every set of holes in pairs now. Okay, going a little bit further to the right. Had to keep this lady's identity anonymous. So we've got the corner there, in that corner there, and then it goes down, and then there's two here and here. The broken one again. This one over here. Curious. Is the darkened patch, does it have something to do with them? I don't know. Is this a cavity? Perhaps. It's only one though, I don't see another one. But it's just interesting placements. Here's a couple more I spotted. Had to really zoom in on one of the It's one of the stock Alamy photos of Cappadocia. You just Google the stock ones and go HD and hunt for these things. They're all over. But here's a couple good examples. Right above the niches. Not centered above the niches, though. So what's going on? Maybe hanging, drapes, curtains. I don't know. More niches below, though. Interesting. And Cappadocia's exteriors look like Swiss cheese. So you guys can just go to town looking for different holes here. But there's some that really do look compelling. Like this one front and center. Sorry, that's too far. That one front and center does look like a pinch hole. And then down here, I want to say this is a pair. And maybe some of these other ones are pairs. Why are they there in these configurations? How are they made? An interior example, maybe. This is the same area, Cappadocia, in one of the rock cut monasteries. Now, the religious motifs, is that contemporaneous with the pinch hole, or this artifact that we see down here? Is this a pinch hole? I want to say it is, but it doesn't connect, right? It's just two divots. But in some cases, I think they are just divots. And it's almost like they didn't go all the way. It started and then they stopped it for whatever reason. Is this the time periods, right? You're kind of confronted. If we're talking about super ancient stuff here, we've got, more recent, relatively recent religious iconography here. So what do you guys think? I really don't know. And then purpose again, I don't know. Next we'll jump over to Jordan real quick. There's only one site here, I think. We'll discuss it, but it's a little rock cut shrine, and you won't find many photos of this. I believe there's only two. Not many people have been here. But look what we have. We have these little niches, but above them we have the pinch holes. They are definitely the same configuration as the other ones we've been looking at. This one on the right is probably the largest. Definitely goes all the way through. This one is broken, intact, broken. Perhaps this was one. And then we got to start questioning some other things going on in this photo, the next photo, and this site. There's some texturing going on, and I don't know how to explain it. Do you guys? Do you know the chiseling technique that would cause this kind of evidence? The niches on the left have a very strange pitting or cavitation to them. And I'm going to have you guys remember this because we're going to look at another site way far away from here, and we're going to say maybe this is the exact same evidence. So keep this texturing in mind. Maybe this is a pinch hole. Like again, it didn't go all the way through. It's just a couple divots. And this is really an interesting wall. You'll zoom in and you'll see over here we have one of what we call the candy wrapper motifs. It's a panel, an inscription panel frame, and it's a rectangle with these little triangular protrusions on both sides. Looks like a piece of candy that's been twisted on both ends, Tootsie Rolls. So we don't know, there's probably a official name for those, but I have not come across it. And we see these like in lots of different regions, but mostly Greco-Roman. So I think it's a mainstream attributed to the Romans, but I think it's gonna be a little bit more widespread and maybe more ancient. I don't know. You guys are gonna have to help me with that motif, but that's another video. And here's one that I think is a little bit sharper with less contrast, but we're seeing some really wild stuff. The shrines, the little niches, some of them are blank. Some of them have the Beytels, B-E-Y-T-L, I believe is how it's spelled, Beytel. These little votive shrines. These, we're supposed to have them maybe, but the way they're formed, they have these overcuts. Or, maybe they're wood frames that slotted in. I don't know, but they look unfinished or something went wrong here. And this pinch hole here goes right through the corner of it. Curious. Here's the last really clear picture. What is it? Are they hanging blankets, curtains over them, drapes to, hide them, to obscure them, to keep them safe, and then they just reveal them, like pull back the curtains? Maybe. That's probably the most feasible explanation in this scenario. But this one here was like they goofed, they messed up, I don't know. And then of course you guys are seeing the writing. Is that original and contemporary? Or is this later graffiti? You guys tell me. And then jumping off of that Jordan site, I was trying to look for more, and I went over to Petra and I was looking at some photos there. Found a related area where there's some Beetles again, these niches with these votive items and objects in them. And what do we see? I mean, what do we see? Is this a pinch hole? And this is huge. I mean, these are almost as tall as a person. So what is going on here? It looks like something is going in and coming out again. Like an in and an out. Energy maybe? I don't know. I'd like to see, maybe get a bendy straw, see if that goes through and comes out the other side. And then of course there's some other pitting and stuff. I don't know if that's related, but there's some different colors going on that's curious. I don't know. You guys tell me. It's a very interesting feature. If it's just natural geology, could be, but it is curious. Next, let's jump over to Malta, because there's some really cool stuff in Malta. And thanks again to Ziggy Dan, because he's been providing me a lot of these, and he knows this site very well. Hagar Kim and the Hypogeum even. So if you've seen these sites, you might have seen these holes before here. So in this configuration, they are in the corners mostly, around doorways. Do these look familiar to anyone? They might be if you've looked at Malta megalithic sites before. So I believe it's all the same. What is going on? Maybe a different purpose, maybe again a curtain, something strung across, hanging things. But I think this is all created the same way, however it was done, but I think it was advanced. We have crazy examples. This is probably the best photo that I have. Look at this thing. I believe this is looking down. It's in the ground, just on a block. I don't know the context. But again, you have two different paths of material. Now, this side's more rounded. This side has more straight striations, like in and out maybe. And then again, what's with all the rest of them? I see a lot of these holes in pairs now. Are these other little baby pinch holes and tiny, even micro pinch holes? I believe this one's pretty big, and you could probably lash a pretty good size rope through this if that's what you were going to do, but I just don't know if that's what this is. Another example, and I'm assuming about the same size, in the same context, this one's kind of in the corner here, and it might have different, paths of trajectory here, maybe different profiles on either side. This one looks pretty rounded. Love to dig that out and see what else that looks like. I'm sure they connect. Really good close-up of one of the corner ones. It's really weird the way it is created. This side has one area darker than the other. What's that about? Some kind of scorching maybe? I don't know. But and I see again two different profiles. I see more rounded, and then I see more straight striations on this side. And it's just interesting how it's kind of globular as it comes down to this pinch. And then I start looking and I see all the other little dimples and divots, and I really wonder if it's also the same thing, just smaller. The site is famous for being perforated. It has a lot of stones and doorways and blocks that have this stylized texturing done to it, ornamentation, but it's just an interesting execution, however it was done. This object in particular is pretty interesting. I wonder if this is a pinch hole. And then of course in the doorway, you see them here and here. But then I start looking around, guys, and I really wonder about some of these other areas of cavitation, erosion, whatever you want to call them. I see another pair here. Maybe these are all pairs. Really don't know. An example where they don't connect, I don't believe. I don't believe they do. So this is just two divots, but they do angle towards each other. I think it's the same thing going on. This one's just unfinished or wasn't bored all the way through, however it was done. And I see other stuff, and I'm sure you do too. What is that? I don't know. And then a lot of this stuff up here is in pairs, two. I don't know. What do you guys think? How much is natural? How much isn't? And yeah, here inside the hypogeum, this is a really cool photo. Now this one's a horizontal execution. It's got that butterfly wing profile if you turn your head sideways. Why would it be there? And is there another one? Maybe. I don't know. You won't find many angles and photos of the inside. There's other interesting elements, maybe holes and cavitation, but definitely this thing. Now how about this one from Israel? This is in the Beit Shean region by the Cave of Coffins, which has some interesting sarcophagi in it, and some interesting stone doors and doorways, facades, but also some random blocks like this. Here we have a pinch hole with a squared off profile. It's got the menorah on it, so you know that's from the region. Wonder if it has anything to do, the symbolism, if it relates. And then there's another interesting channel, a little notch cut into this side. I'm sure this is a recycled configuration. I'm sure this was in a more prominent position if it had a carving on it. I wonder what it was originally and wonder why that was there. All right, if you're not convinced yet, I'm going to show you a few here that are probably going to blow your mind. Now, this is India at the Ellora Caves and the Kailasa Temple. Very famous. You guys know Kailasa Temple is a representation of Mount Kailash. It's probably one of the most amazing rock-cut temples. It's all one-piece monolithic. So first, let's look at the configurations that might make some sense. So here we have a doorway, a trapezoidal doorway. It's in a rough level of finish. And what do you see on both sides? Pinch holes. And maybe another hole of some kind. But yes, here in India as well, we're going to see these in some of these kind of same configurations as the other areas, around doorways, maybe on corners of elements. But some of this stuff just doesn't make sense after a while. I'll show you some more examples here. Now this is in the middle underneath the Kailasa Temple, the representation of Mount Kailash. And this central four-way doorway, four corners doorway, I've talked about it a couple times before. It's very interesting. Has the incised motif on the doorway. It's a lot like Persepolis and some places in Peru even. So should be familiar with that design. We looked at it in some of our rock cut tombs and mining operations maybe in our last video. But let's zoom in here and see what we can see. This is a really good photo. Aha! Now why are they down here? They're on the corners. That's typical so far. We see them vertically on the corners of stuff. But down here, there's just a couple, and I think every corner has them. But look lower, there's even more in the actual floor. And that's going to be a theme going forward. We're going to see more of them in the floor. And I haven't seen many in the ceiling, but there's not many people taking photos of the ceiling. So there's none in the statuary, like in the arms or the hips or anything like we saw in Egypt. I don't see any of that. No, it's all very nicely done and smooth. But then we have the pinch holes at the base. Why? And then I started to notice some more pinching at the bottoms, the pedestals of the columns. And this is all one piece rock cut, right? But there's pinches in the corners, and they're horizontal here. They seem sometimes to mirror each other. But then look, there's one in the floor. Why? And then maybe these are all pinches in the floor. Why would they do that? You're just going to trip over those, right? Maybe they're going to put a floor over it. Okay, well, not much room here decoratively with the bottoms of the pedestals. I don't know, you guys tell me. But those look like pinch holes as well. More of them in the same kind of configuration at the bases. Like a twin pair there that's broken. And the one on the right, it's like barely hanging in there. It's pretty cavitated, pretty eroded, or however you want to describe it. Other interesting holes, sockets. That was probably for a lingam. I don't see any nubs. Sometimes you will see nubs adjacent to these, which is very interesting, and we'll show more of that later. Again, here, same configuration. The bottoms, there's two there. See them? Now, in that configuration, I could say, well, maybe there was a screen, curtain, tapestries and banners. Seems kind of like a decorative anchoring point. I don't think that would be anything structural, though. I don't really see many more. Maybe some of this is. Hard to say. Some of these photos you can't get the best quality, of course. Some go up the pillars, the columns, both sides here. Here's one. This side, I believe it matches the height. Then this has 3 in it. And I think that's one in the back. And then there's some other just interesting holes and sockets. And then one down at the bottom, too. Interesting configurations. Now, how about this one? This one is really wild. I saw this one, and I said, well, that's what I'm looking at, but what does it mean? This pillar has tiny little pinch holes up here, and they kind of damage, you know, the surface and the appearance. So why would you do that? Why would you configure them like that? Is that just a byproduct of the tech that did this? However that was done. I love this example. What's going on there? Only thing I can think is hanging a chain or a rope with, you know, votive items, things like that. Amulets. Outside, same area, same thing. Bottom left, we have one at the corner. On the right, we have one at the corner. This one is broken, vertical and horizontal. Another one here, this is pretty cool. This photo has some great detail. You can get right up close, see the scratch marks, tool marks, however it was done, and then look down here at the bottom. A pinch hole. Why there? Why by itself? Is it an ancient version of this above? You guys tell me. No others, not in the statuary. Very curious. And then I love this example. So this is all rock cut one piece again. Can you see them? Maybe not. Maybe we'll zoom in some more. Starting on the right. Look in the background on the bedrock. They're back here. And then moving forward into the temple. They're here. Up here's one. I'm sorry, I know it's grainy, but they're there. Here, here, there. These are all pinches. There. Back down again along the bottom, and then look over in the corner. On that corner, there is another one, and maybe some other stuff going on. Curious how it does that. It like goes from one side to the other, maybe? I don't know how to describe it. Technology working it from one side to the other, I don't know. It's got interesting color variations again. It seems to have like a grain going through it. And maybe there's like a level of cavitation going through certain elements. But that is really wild. Rock cut again. I think we see a lot of it in these rock cut examples because it was a setting, like a high-tech setting, and you turned the power up and it resulted in these sometimes. But maybe you could control it again, just like with the nubs. And another one here, thanks to Vlad9VT. He's been, you know, documenting nubs and things for a long time. You guys know him. I highly recommend his channel. He found us one, and I don't know if he knew what he was looking at. This is a screenshot, of course. But what is it? I think it is the same thing. It's a pinch. Maybe it's not all the way through, but it looks very eerily similar to the one at Cappadocia, especially with the scratches around it. But yeah, that one's very interesting. It's got that hemispherical shape to it. One side's a little bigger than the other again. Okay, how about a shocker? Göbekli Tepe. How about that? On the pillar that has the relief animal, the 3D relief animal, I am pretty certain that's what we're looking at here is another pinch hole. And this one is in the vertical configuration. And I really wonder if we excavate some more and do some really thorough searching, we might find more of these pinch holes at Göbekli Tepe. So that's just, you know, blows mainstream story right out of the water and has all kinds of implications. I don't know. I don't even know where to begin. But you guys tell me if that is even what I'm looking at. I think it is. How about Iran? Now we were talking about Persepolis, right? I have a really good photo here. Brian Forrester brought us this one. Look at this. Now, so many things are going on in here. We have nubs, we have bevel lines, we have different levels of finish on the surface, you know, pitting, other notches and things going on. You know, that's like triangular notches. This one I love because it's off, it's crooked. Why would they do that? How would they do that? This one has a different profile as well. And obviously, you know, would this be an original exterior? I don't know. I think this is recycled somehow, but advanced recycling. And if you zoom in, you'll see what I think is another set of those pinch holes. And they're by themselves, or maybe some of this other stuff is related. But again, perhaps this is a recycled configuration. So these blocks had another purpose originally, and then they were recycled, but advanced recycling, because this is still polygonal, tight fitting. It's very impressive, but I don't know how they did this. Or how about the Darius tombs? This is interesting. A pair of holes over here on the left. Do they connect? I don't know. But they're very curious, and they're by themselves again. I don't know why else they would be there. Then we're going to go down and look at this inscription panel down here. We're going to zoom in a little more, but I think already you can see what I'm about to talk about. So here you go again. Let's zoom in and look really close. It's a good photo. A pair of holes. Another pair of holes. And then I think right here is another pair. There's other divots and things going on, of course, but I think at least 3 pinch holes again. That's the only thing I can call them. Another angle here. This is really compelling over here to me. I think this is the same thing. Another illustration panel. Down on the right, another pair of holes. I think that's the same thing again. And it really reminds me of like grounding, again with welding. Before you start your welding work, you have to ground yourself, ground the tool. Is that what's going on here? Is this evidence of grounding? Really makes me wonder. And then how about Peru? Because I'm sure everybody wants to know what I found in Peru. Well, I found some pretty compelling stuff here. So first, in this megalithic block, I think it's the exact same thing. Diagonal, one side's bigger than the other. Maybe there's other traces of other failed ones or partial pinches. Same kind of varied striations, one versus the other. Maybe all these little, I mean, you look really close and every little pair of bits here, it really makes you wonder what's going on. Is this electrical arcing of some kind? I really don't know, but I think that's probably one of the more compelling ideas here. Is there's some kind of arcing going on against the surface. Here's another angle of that shows it does go through. And then that really makes me wonder about some of this other evidence traces that I see on walls at Sacsayhuaman. Is this pinching again? I don't know. Could be though. And Phil and I have already talked about the Coricancha inner temples in previous episodes, but again, it's a nub structure. You see the nubs here and there. Up here, these pinches. And I think we're going to classify these the same as the rest. At least the ones that are showing up on the corners anyway. Same kind of profile. Rounded, maybe one side's bigger than the other. In a row like this. This is the only scenario I've seen with a configuration like this. Looks like something was supposed to be braided into it somehow. And then, this is just a great photo. You can look at the surfaces, the pitting, the mitering of the edges, the way the pitting gets more refined as it gets closer to the joint. Reminds me a lot of Baalbek, and some of the large stones have almost the same kind of profile, and it gets down to the microscopic level. Really amazing. Close-up of one. Maybe that's just cobwebs in there, or maybe that's melted stone. I really don't know. It looks like that kind of profile again. One side is smaller, one side is bigger. Here's a cool photo. There's a few things going on. First of all, circled is what I believe is another pinch hole. And there might even be little tiny microscopic ones. Do you guys see that? So maybe there's little tiny baby ones in the blocks. Up here as well, I wanted to point out. I believe that's a pair, and over here is a pair, and maybe lots of others. Maybe all of this is just pitting done with pinches. I don't know. You see here there's a corner block, an L-shaped block, and there's obviously more to it in the past, but That's an impressive block and joinery. And then speaking of joinery, let's go down here back to the pinch. You notice something odd about that joint? It's not real. It's fake. It's an imitation joint. That is really interesting. Why would they do that? They did that at Bellevue Mausoleum too, at the tumulus. It's like they wanted to make it look less impressive? I don't know. Shortcut of some kind. Here's one of those random out-of-place blocks at the Coricancha. See very precision, circular pinch holes. And we'll see this at Pumapunku in a minute as well. Very precision examples. Another one, and this configuration is a lot like the doorway that Phil and I talked about, one of the central features of the Coricancha. This is the same kind of processing or traces on it as that doorway and those holes we saw recently. This is the same thing again, guys. It's pinching at the corners. Some of it, I don't know how to explain some of it. It's just off. But then there's channels in between it, kind of like a Cappadocia. At the doorway at Cappadocia, it had the same kind of channels. What's going on here? It seems to be the same thing, whatever it is. Here's a big slab that Ziggy found, just laying out here. Maybe turned into a dolmen of some kind, but it's got a pinch hole in it. Really great close-up quality photo. Look at that. It really reminds me of the Malta examples. It's pretty substantial. That might be able to pull it around. I don't know. But you'd have to move it pretty delicately. I still think that would be fragile and break if you tried to move this giant stone by that. But it looks just like the other stuff. And then Ziggy also found some cool ones at the Pisac or the Pisac area. Look at these. They're kind of crude, or they're done in crude masonry, or at least partially crude masonry. So what is the timeline here? What are these niches? Were they original and then it collapsed and was repaired? It seems like that above, but it still doesn't seem too great below either. So who did do this? Was this more recent than some of these other more megalithic and precision examples? I don't know, but how did they make the holes? It just begs a lot of questions. See them here in both doorways, about the same height on the second level, second course, over here as well. And I don't believe this one over here goes all the way through, but these obviously do. You can see daylight through that one. So they look like they're maybe roped off or something attached to hang. I don't know, but kind of a typical configuration though on the corners at doorways. It's like what we're seeing in the other places. Here's a couple, maybe three, maybe more. Who knows? But it's kind of a rough, crude construction. Maybe these are recycled here. Here's a really cool example, and Chris at the Stone Language and I were talking about this. Now in the back you see the Cyclopean, then you see the precision, then you see the less precise. So there's a lot being said here, timeline-wise maybe, but different levels of execution for sure. And these elements, I believe these are the pinch holes again. They loop through. These are very precise, very square, very refined. And then this feature above is a loop. It's a hoop with a hole in it. Does it correspond? Was there a door that worked somehow? Features and elements that are missing today. How did it work? It really makes you wonder. Again, I think it's the same thing, if nothing else. It's the same idea and execution. Here you go. Let's look closer. You can see in there, you can see the vertical part. So that does loop back around. This side presumably as well. And another ring at the top, another hoop. So the configuration seems to be the same. Door on both sides. Different heights on this side. This side's higher up. That's a lot smaller. Just curious. At this point, I'm just making observations. Small filler stone at the corner here. That's cool. And even in this recent artifact that they found, I believe this was in Lake Titicaca or one of the lakes or one of the underwater caves, they pulled this out. It had a stopper in it and some items in it. But let's look at the thing itself. It's got pinches in it on both sides. Was that to be lowered by ropes, maybe? Or was that to bind it and keep the stopper closed and keep it on the box, the container? That makes sense. It seems like a practical purpose. This is like a Swiss Army tool. Maybe in this instance, they needed it to lash down some rope to keep that stopper on it. I mean, you can have different kinds of cordage going through these for different purposes if that's what we're going to talk about. And then we might as well talk about Pumapunku, Bolivia. You know that's a nub site. The Akapana Pyramid has nubs. And what's left of the temple here, I'm sure you've seen this. This is a famous photo. Precision corner hole. Is this a pinch hole or is this just a corner hole? You know, how do we describe these and categorize these and how do we define them? I think it's the same scenario, the same execution, maybe for a different purpose, but it's like the other stuff. And everyone focuses on these elements, but let's look in the back. What is this? Aha. Now, we see the loop in the rock, and that kind of looks like the illustration we saw at the beginning of the video, how rope would go through to lift it. But it's also got the pinch holes as well. So were they using all three together to lift it and move it? I don't know. It's on the other side as well. So I'd really like to see some more of this. And, you know, all these blocks are half submerged. So who knows what other kind of evidence is going on here. Again, everyone focuses on the pretty elements. And yes, they are. And they're impressive. And clamps in the top and everything. But over on the left, let's zoom in on that. I believe this is a partial pinch hole or a pinch hole. And these are the corner pinch holes as well. This one's probably broken. Interesting chisel marks, tool marks along the edge. That kind of reminds me of India and Egypt and lots of places, really. Japan. And then let's jump over to Japan because I got some things to say. I haven't found too much here yet, but there could be more evidence of this. Let's look at something famous first. The octopus stone, the very large stone at Osaka Castle. Now, I wonder, it's called the octopus stone because of all of these indentions and divots in it. Looks like an octopus grabbed it, right? Look at them in pairs. I see lots of pairs. Is this pinch holes again? Really wild stone. Down at the bottom, I see pairs again. Crazy. Here at Osaka Castle still. Is this another instance of pinching? Just not complete, not thorough, just divots. Looks like scoop marks like you would see in the Serapeum sarcophagi and some of the other boxes I mentioned in the Pandora's Boxes video. These are interesting. Here as well on another one of the larger slabs, I see pairs again, especially here. Is this pinching evidence? I don't know. Some of it is just by itself, and you can kind of, get lost in the minutia, and it kind of, gets hard to prove after a while, I understand, but some of these, they really are compelling. A wall that's supposed to have projectile damage, cannons and such. Maybe you could say that. Some of it. Are there pairs, though? Let's look at another angle. Corner filler stone down here, by the way. Okay, what do you think? Pinching? I see it here. And I screenshotted this specifically because this block is interesting. It's got the pinches. I believe it's got a nub on it as well. And other big cavitation like the damage holes we talk about. So is it projectile or is this another kind of damage? And this block has the striations and even a bevel line. How about that? You won't see many bevel blocks in Japan, but they're there. Polygonal. And you will see even less nubs. I only have a few photos of nubs from Japan. Okay, and then a few more honorable mentions before we go on to some of the really crazy stuff at the end here, guys. I really appreciate you all for hanging out with me this long. I know it's getting to be a long video, but let's look at a couple just singular examples I noticed. First of all, Matruun here, Greece, Turkey. This column, by itself here, has one little pinch in it. What is that about? Why is it pinched in that fluted column like that? Found that one really curious. And this side also has nubs, by the way. And then, how about magnesia? This is interesting. An unfluted column. But I think that's the exact same thing. I think this is another pinch. It might not be all the way through, but I think that is a pinch. Interesting how part of it is still rough. You see that. However this was made, part of it is still rough. And then I have a couple here that I'm not sure the location on. We didn't have context for these. I want to say this is Old World Greco-Roman maybe. This stone has a couple of them and some other dents and divots. Very curious piece. Other chunks missing, wedge holes perhaps. Same kind of chiseling or grooves, incisement, whatever you want to say. See that at India, Japan, Egypt. Here's a site in the Golan Heights, and I want to say this is the same thing again. This configuration is curious. It's a very hefty one, substantial. This might support lifting. So maybe this was like a counterweight, or both of these, or all three of these, who knows, were counterweights for some kind of drawbridge or defensive feature. I kind of think that. They're rough stones, they're not very pretty, but could have other purposes. But maybe again it's like a Swiss Army knife. They had different purposes for whatever this was. If it was just a byproduct, they could work with it. An example on the side of an arch here, what's left of it, a bevel block site. I believe this is one of the Crusader forts. Odd for it to be there. Maybe it's a banner, like the other examples. Maybe it's like a banner or a tapestry, ropes, perhaps. Interesting. It's got a little bit of a discoloration, different colors. You see the darker gray areas. Does that have something to do with it? I don't know. And this site is called Silion, and I believe this has a pair above the door, right there. And maybe some of this pitting is the same thing up here as well. Over here, you start seeing more of it, right? Here, here, here. Were these all pinched? You can see the bevels, the different finishes on the surfaces. Very cool structure. Other holes in the lintel here. Very precise. Some interesting ornamentation. Maybe some of this other cavitation. I see it in pairs, right? I see pairs. Even here, like that little bit. Who knows? Another angle, a little brighter. I don't know if it goes all the way through, but that does look like the pinching we've been looking at. And all the other cavitation and stuff as well, especially on those corners. Especially around here as well. And some of this is the leaves. Look past the leaves. There's other holes. Termantia in Spain. Some of their stuff there is really wild. Has cart ruts like Malta, which has the pinch holes, right? Here's a tunnel, and I believe this is what we're looking at here. This might be broken. Other divots and impressions. But we'll zoom in a little bit more. I think this is a pinch hole right here. Same kind of configuration, by the doorways again. Now we're at Delphi in Greece, and this has some pretty cool stuff to talk about. First of all, nubs, of course, right? And the bevels, and very interesting textures and the precision. Look below the nub, though. Is that a pinch hole? And is some of this other cavitation pinch holes again? I think there might be something to this. There's a correlation. The way the nubs are formed, the way the pinches are formed. I think it's the same tech. Now this is the Delphi Amphitheater. I've zoomed in. This is a Google Street View, but there's one really good high-resolution photo. If you Google Delphi Amphitheater and search by large photos, the first one is very big, and you can zoom in and see all these nubs and all these features like these lipped blocks and these weird lips at the joints. Some of the joints look fake again. Nubs on the stairs and random places, of course. We talked about that before. That's the amphitheater nubs episode. But let's look over to the left here. I see a lot of little butterfly impressions that looks again like pinch holes. And then I have another photo that I've adjusted, doctored. I've just turned up the contrast and brightness. I think these are pinch holes again. And I think it has something to do with the nubs. I think it's some kind of arcing, like a spattering of some kind of discharge, electrical maybe, energy transfer. It looks like it got out of control here. And then maybe, just maybe, there's Stonehenge too. And I've pulled some out of my normal folder of Stonehenge. Some of these angles you don't really get too often. Now this stone, a lot of people get this wrong. This was all cavitated, all missing. And this is a modern restoration. This is not proof that it's modern and smothered over or anything like that. This is just a modern repair to keep the menhir intact, keep the standing stone intact. But let's look at the surface of this. Now that we looked at all that other stuff, do you see pairs of divots and pinches? I definitely do. Down here, and then the big ones up here. So what does it say when they're getting this big? And we haven't even started. We're going to get way bigger. And then what do you see off in the background? Hello. Another pair. Is that what these are? I mean the butterfly shape again. I really think that's what these are. I think it's tech. It's how all this stuff got done. The heel stone, it has it too. I think this is the same thing again. Some of the other stuff is just more blown out. Maybe this was broken, damaged. I'm really surprised I don't see more instances of people hanging things from them and putting ropes through them today, but maybe they just don't realize. But I see pairs again, guys. How about here? Do you see a pair of holes here? Maybe another one there. And then down here, I think it's all evidence of this pinching. Okay, so if you put up with all these and you're still not convinced, you still think it could be explained away as easy, crude methods with a chisel and for whatever purposes, it doesn't matter. It's just guys with little chisels and hammers and doing it simple and crude and primitive. Well, now we're going to look at the finale here, Georgia, and this really turned my mind upside down. There's a lot of weird stuff going on in Georgia. Okay, there's two sites we're going to look at. Uplishka, and I have a really hard time pronouncing that and spelling that, and then Vardzia. And they're basically the same kind of sites, rock cut monasteries, dwellings, whatever you want to call them. Uplishka seems smaller but very weird, and then Vardzia is more like what we talked about with Phil in the last episode. So we'll start with Uplishka because there's just some really wild stuff there. Okay, right away I want to get this mentioned. There are nubs here. In the floor, these are nubs. That might not look like the traditional nubs we see other places, but I'm fairly convinced that these are nubs. We're going to see them again in a minute on a set of stairs. So if they're on the stairs, that's like India and lots of other places. I think these are the same. I think these are nubs. Now, were you guys remembering the scratch marks I was telling you about at Jordan, where the niches were in the overhang in the side of the bedrock? Well, I think this is exactly the same. Not just similar, but exactly the same. And I'm going to pull up a side by side. But first I want to show you an up close. Look around it. There's other pinches and holes. I think it's the same thing. Lots more of it here to show. These are just kind of vague examples. I'll show much more clear examples. But let's pause here. Let's look at something. What do you guys think? I think that's exactly the same. There's pinches at both sites, rock cut niches, and this processing evidence. And then other areas in Petra that Brian Forrester has shown have this same kind of, almost like a pick has repeatedly hit it. But I'm not convinced that's what's going on. More doorways, more pairs of divots, and other impressions. I think this is pinching. Here as well, the same thing. Some interesting scratches. Staining, likely from birds, I want to say. Other scoops. A lot of scoops here. Interesting. Big scoops. Big scoops. And I think this is pinching evidence again. Same kind of profile, just divots. They don't connect. Interesting vertical repeating scooping down here. More scooping down here. And some of this stuff even looks like Peru, like at Machu Picchu. Some of the colors and some of the processing traces look the same. Check this out. That is a nub right there. And these other holes, I'm not sure about all of them, but I see pairs again. Ah, yeah, see down here? There's a pair of divots. And then if we zoom out, I want you all to notice the large outcrop in the background, right? You see it's got lots of holes in it. And I'm seeing pairs again. Here, here. Some over here looks like a pinch. Some of these other ones, maybe even here in the outcrop in the foreground. More compelling photos coming up. Here's a really cool photo, and the photographer probably didn't know what he was taking a photo of. But zoom in, look down in the shadow. That is a pinch hole for sure, 100%. It's very odd placement. Some other interesting features going on around it. And then you look in the background, and there's some other interesting things like perforations, divots. Oh yeah, and then this giant hole in the right with other pairs of divots. Now we're getting very weird. Maybe here too. And here, another pinch. Zoom in. There and there. Now, starting to beg the question, how big can they make the pinches? Well, pretty big. How about the sizes of the chambers themselves? What do you think that is? What else could that be? I think this is all pinching again, just large scale now. I mean really big. I mean these pinches, I think they are the same, just turned all the way up to 11. They made the chambers with the pinches, I think. Here and here and all these other ones. It's like they just perforated the mountainside. I really don't know how else you want to explain it. Here there's lots of divots and impressions and scratches and things. Why else would that be there? That is a pinch. Probably a byproduct of making this little shelf. And you see all kinds of other crazy scoops and maybe other pinching all the way up there. Great example here. I missed it the first few times I was looking. First of all, there's some pretty interesting little beehive or whatever you want to call these niches for birds or whatever they're for. You see those at Cappadocia too, the exact same expression. You see those at Israel as well, the exact same expression. Anyway, let's go up here. Pinches in the top. We'll zoom way in. As far as it goes. These are pinches. I guarantee it. More of it. Some of it is rows. Maybe you see them as pairs. I do. And then if that's not convincing enough, and these other ones aren't convincing enough, right here at this little niche, there's a pinch for sure. The same profile, one smaller, one bigger. You can see plainly the striations coming out of this one. And there's also some other interesting striations in the bedrock, but other pinches as well here, definitely. You could see through that one. Really makes you wonder about all the other holes and how they were made. And then here's your nub on the staircase. Maybe a couple, but they've been broken. Definitely one right there, though. That's a nub. And then other cavitation, maybe in pairs again. Yep. Other curious bits like this recess, very precise. I don't know why that's there. Seems to be in correlation with some pinch holes, though. Really weird. And then how weird do you want to get? I mean, just look. I mean, this is wild. They are manipulating the bedrock somehow. You see a lot of scoop marks. I want to say on the right that these are nubs, just poorly formed nubs, but pulled out the same way or extruded the same way, made the same way. Maybe some other globules here. Who knows? All this is scooped, though. You can see the scoop marks. You can see the scoop marks and the pushed up material and how it curves. It's lipped. How do they do that? Reminds me of Peru in some areas, but like nothing like that. The tunnels look like this. I don't know, guys. That's pretty out there to me. I think I see pinching and other... Maybe it's pinching. Who knows? Just divots, at least. Interesting how there's different rings, repeating rings, like braces, like ribbing. Support. Weird. Yeah, just weird. Weird is the takeaway that I've gotten from this region and some of this other bedrock cliff dwellings and stuff. It's wild. Why would this be done this way? Another vertical element notch into a hole. This is that building that has the nubs on the floor. It's being supported, but it was originally all rock cut. What is this over on the right? It really does look like a pinch. Two hemispheres, a ridge. Some of this other stuff, I really don't know. But it's wild looking. I see things in pairs again. But yeah, as small as those ones in Peru, or as big as these. This might be a pinch. This up here, that looks dead on like all the other things we looked at today. And that's huge. That's a pair of niches, big enough to put, one of these little shrines or votive objects in. More scooping. Are they pinching out the entire mountainside and making these caverns? And then is it also byproduct of the tech, and then they're using it for secondary purposes? What is going on? I got all kinds of questions. Are you guys seeing a resemblance? Georgia, pinch holes, the striations, the way this was worked. Peru, Machu Picchu, strange bedrock processing and the striations and how it was worked. Machu Picchu also has pinch holes. They are the same kind of configuration as what we see at Coricancha, and these little grooves in between, these little channels. That's pinching, guys. It's the same thing, and the configuration is appropriate around the doorways again. This is my profile photo, and this is one of my favorite photos for many reasons. It's got all kinds of evidence going on here, and I'm glad I'm finally able to address some of the wilder stuff here, the weirder stuff at the bottom. I think it's related. So guys, just thanks for sticking with me this long, and hopefully you found this as compelling as I did, and hopefully I haven't turned too many of you off to what I talk about, because I think this is just related. It's mysterious. It hasn't been thoroughly discussed or cataloged like this, and I think I'm one of the first ones to do it. I hope I did it justice. You guys, please tell me all your thoughts in the comments. I don't care how crazy or mundane, because I'm open to everything right now. This is just a complete black hole of research that I want to at least make more transparent. I just don't know what to say about it that I haven't already said. I think it's tech. I think it's advanced. I think they could do it at the micro scale all the way up to the sides of cliffs and maybe bigger. Who knows? But they could shape the world and shape cliff sides and work matter in ways that we just don't know anything about. And origins, if you want to be really out there and say extraterrestrial, let's talk about it. I'm open to it. I don't care what any of the other researchers are saying otherwise and against. I think it's completely valid. This stuff is so weird in execution, and the obvious parallels across all these places, that's a huge factor, right? All these places are very disparate, but these features are almost identical at all these different places. So how is that happening? And in these major famous places, Göbekli Tepe and Stonehenge, what is it saying about the stories about how they were built and all the megaliths and all the ancient sites? It's amazing. It's heretical. It's mind-blowing. It might be revolutionary. I don't know. I think it's important. I think it was worth making this video. I really hope you guys appreciated it. Thanks for hanging out with me. We'll talk to you next time.